New microphone. If this microphone doesn't work, I will actually jump off a building. Hello. This video is a weird one because I have once again over-researched and dug myself into a huge rabbit hole. Hello. It started by me looking at the Gaia spear and ended up with me reading nearly the entire Ulster cycle and completely trashing the original scope that I had for this video. So I have been in a hole trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing here. So today, I wish to look at the mythical hero of Chulainn, his special weapon, the Gaia spear, and see how he shapes up compared to other heroes of epic myth and stuff from elsewhere in the world. For example, Achilles, because I love Achilles and everyone here loves Achilles, don't we?
We all love Achilles.
And if we've got time, I would also like to look at how these stories have actually survived to us to this day. So please join me. Take my hand, please. I've been researching and reading about this for months. I'm going to go crazy until this video is made. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video if you want to. Leave a wee comment. Be nice though. My bibliography and further reading is always in the description box below if you fancy reading up more about it yourself. Let's go. Let's start this. Please, let me start this, finally. I've moved over here because I want to be comfy, and also new microphone has been ditched because it was so tinny. However, I've now had a cold for about a week, so now I sound all snotty and horrible. It's fine, just mute the first half of the video, yeah? Come back in like 10 minutes time, it'll be fine. We'll all sound normal again, I'll be happy. Who is Chulainn, actually? What are we talking about here? Chulainn is the main hero of the Ulster cycle, which is an Irish piece of medieval literature. I hardly know her. And he's a demigod, actually. He is the son of Princess Chulainn, I hope I've said that right, who is the sister of King Cunliffe, and his dad is the mythical god King Lu. Sometimes his parents sort of differ depending on the version that you read. Sometimes Lu is just like an overseer, but he's a demigod. That's the main thing you have to take away from that. Most demigods in all forms of mythology do have some sort of divine parentage or link in some way, whether it's an actual physical bloodline or a god just particularly favours them, which is great. I wish a god would favour me sometimes. His name translates to the Hound of Chulainn, but he was actually born as Setanta. He gained his Doug name because when he was wee he killed the blacksmith's dog, the blacksmith being Chulainn, so he sort of became the blacksmith's guard dog to make up for it. And at the wee age of 7 he was prophesied to have a life filled with glory and fame at the cost of dying young in battle, much like our boy Achilles. So he's the main hero and he's a knight of the Red Branch under his uncle, King Cunliffe. Being a demigod though, of course he has a special power. What the hell? And this is called the Rustrad, where he pretty much goes mental. It's like a rage thing and he grows massive, his body turns like inside out. And yeah, he just goes mad. It's mental, really. It's hard to visualise. He doesn't do it often, but when he does, it's a real struggle to sort of bring him back from, so he doesn't do it very often, and it's usually in like a fit of rage sort of thing that I don't even know if he can really control. But other than that, he is your typical mythical hero. He starts fighting at the age of 17. He's a wee boy, a wee babby. He's strong, he's good looking, he's for the most part morally good. He's fast, he's obviously a good fighter, and he's usually portrayed as blonde. Like Achilles! Oh my god! Again, we'll come back to that later, but it's fantastic, honestly. We love our boys. Although some sources also say that he looked a little bit freaky. Some is like he had 7 toes and 7 fingers and 7 pupils in his eyes. I don't know if that's when he's in his like rage form or if he's just normal. So he's your typical hero. He has this like rage power, but he also has a very special weapon called the Gaia. What the hell is the Gaia? How did we get here? This mythical weapon is why I started this entire video in the first place, because I wanted to just do a video on the weapon itself, and then I got carried away, didn't I? As I always do. The story goes that Cu was gifted... Do you mind if I call him Cu? Rather than Chulainn every time, I'll just call him Cu. Call him Doug. So the story goes that Cu was gifted the Gaia after training on the Isle of Skye with the warrior goddess Scathach, where he also met his best pal and fighting compadre Ferdia. And Cu barely uses it. For a good reason, which I'm going to tell you for why. The name translates to the notched spear, or the belly spear, because it's like a spiraled barb with loads of little sharp spikes coming out of it, yeah? I was going to say I'll see if I can find a picture, but it's a mythical weapon. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we'll try our best. And it's a spear, but it's designed to be kicked rather than thrown. But once impaled into the target, it would sort of like explode. All the spikes would like poke out and chop his opponent to wee tiny pieces from the inside out, and he'd have to like carve the spear back out when he was done, which is a bit minging. So never mind the trauma of death from such a weapon, it's also just a bloody bother to use, isn't it? So he doesn't use it very often, but he does, spoiler alert by the way, actually use it to kill his best pal, which is really, really sad. Actually, it's really horrible and sad, but we'll get onto that bit in a wee minute. Weh. God. Bloody motorbike going past at this time in the day. I will say it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's completely allowed. What the hell? So we've talked about Chulainn. We've talked about his weapon. Now I want to give you a brief overview of the actual story that is told about them. So the Ulster cycle is a whopper of Irish medieval literature, and you've got the whole cycle, but it's split into separate wee stories told over different parts of time, same as the epic cycle of Homer. So you have the Iliad, you have the Little Iliad, you have the Odyssey, but they all make up one big story, yeah? So it's a similar vibe to that. Again, the comparisons with Achilles are far too many. So the bit that we're focusing on today is the cattle raid of Cooley, otherwise known as the Tombo Culainn, and that is the main chunk of Chulainn and the war that he's involved in. Much like the Iliad, and that being the main chunk of Achilles and his war. Whatever, dude. So we actually start off with Queen Maeve of Connacht and her man, her husband, the king, fighting over who's got the most wealth. They had a big falling out because they're essentially equal, but he has a white cow that makes him more wealthy, and she doesn't like that. She wants it to be equal or her to have more. So she wants to steal the brown cow from King Conchobar of Ulster in order to balance it out / make her the more powerful one. Ireland at this time was a cattle-based economy, and cattle raids such as the one that's about to take place in the story were actually really, really common. So a war breaks out between the two kingdoms. Class. Cu was only 17 years old when the fighting initially broke out, and I think it lasts till he's about 27. Chulainn has to fight the entirety of Maeve's army by himself because the men of Ulster were struck down by a curse because of another story within the Ulster cycle. They were basically all cursed with labour pains because they were horrible to a lassie. Rightfully so, but since Chulainn was 17, he was technically underage, so he wasn't affected the same way all the adults were. Are you following so far, yeah? So he's not completely overwhelmed on the battlefield, he invokes the right of single combat, because he's actually really smart as well, by the way. So he fights Maeve's entire army one by one for as long as he can, and it takes about 10 years. Obviously, he's fighting these guys one by one for 10 years. He eventually gets pretty badly injured and is out of puff, probably. So Papaloo comes down from the sky and knocks him out so he can get a bit of bloody rest and a bit of peace and a bit of kip. In absence of the grown-ups fighting and in the absence of Chulainn fighting, the youth corps jump in and are all completely slaughtered. Every single one of them. They all die. When Cu wakes up from his 5 minutes of peace, he's raging that all the youngsters are dead, and thus it triggers his Ristrad, rage, power, whatever thing it's called, you know what I mean? And he goes mental, just absolutely cutting through the army like nobody's business. Takes a whole big chunk of them out, he's raging. And the battle culminates with Cu fighting his best pal, Ferdia. Ferdia somehow ended up on the other side of the battle because Queen Maeve basically blackmailed him by saying, if you don't fight for me, I'll get the bards to write stories about you being a coward and that. He fights his best pal, and it's really, really sad actually, because they're quite equally matched and they've obviously trained together. It takes days for them to actually start hurting each other, and it starts off like a funny pally fight, and then it gets like sort of more serious and they're like, just one of yous fucking die already. Oops, shouldn't swear like that on YouTube, sorry. One of yous die already. And then eventually the only way for Cu to finish it is by using the Gaia Bolga on Ferdia, because it's his only sort of one-up on him, really, which is really horrible. And then the rest of the army sort of magically get over their period cramps or whatever it is they had, and they start joining in the fight as well. From this point on, there's alternate endings, the more boring of which is that after Ferdia dies, Cuchulainn dies of his wounds as well, and they sort of go together, which is quite peaceful and nice, but also sad. But the more exciting, more detailed end is that Cu obviously survives, and Maeve really wants him dead. Instead of just outright killing him, because he's so strong, steps have to be taken. Maeve tricks him into eating dog meat, which sort of spiritually weakens him because it's against his moral code or whatever as a hero. And she has to team up with some guy called Lugid, who creates 3 spears, hits his horse with one spear, his chariot with the other, and then him with the third. But Cu still cannot be stopped, guys. Once he's been hit by the spear, enchanted spears, whatever the hell goes on there, he actually ties himself to a standing stone upright so that he can still keep fighting, even though he's horrifically injured, just killed his best pal, not having the best of days. So he's still fighting, tied to this rock, and eventually he does actually die. But all the opposing forces are actually too scared to go near his body to double check and make sure he's dead, so they wait till crows start to land on him and stuff, and peck away at him. And just to make sure, Lugid goes up to him to attempt to behead him to make sure he's completely finished off and done. But our boy Cu's a little demigod. It's not that easy to kill them. So as he lifts up his hand to behead him, whatever he does, Cu explodes in what they call a holy light, and his hand swings down and chops off Lugid's hand before he can be beheaded, which is pretty awesome, dude. But he's dead. That's the end of Cu's story, at least. In the end, Maeve does get the brown cow, but it ends up fighting with a white cow that her husband has, and the cows end up killing each other, so it's all for nothing in the end anyway. Class. Now for the bit I've been hinting at this entire time, heroic comparisons with Cu and other figures of ancient myth, mostly Achilles, because hey, that's my boy. Although he can be compared to a bunch of different heroic characters from across the ancient globe. Of course, there's the little things that I've mentioned throughout that sort of line up with their stories, but just to sort of recap, I've picked out 6 sort of major key themes, but there are little ones intertwined throughout the story. You'll have to read it yourself. First and foremost, they are both prophesied to die young but have everlasting glory. As I said earlier, Cu was 7 years old when this was prophesied for him. Achilles was actually given the choice. He was warned by his mum Thetis, go into battle and die young but be remembered forever and have glory and all that, or live a long fulfilled life, have kids and stuff, but everyone will forget your name. So of course he chose to be remembered forever. Second of all, both are of divine descent or demigods. Cu is the son of Lu and Jectinia. I knew I'd lose it. That was the one name that I was struggling with the most. And Achilles is the son of Peleus and Thetis, the sea nymph. But he's very, very much favoured by Zeus and Athena. Apollo doesn't like him though, clearly. Both are also described as swift-footed. I mean, that exact wording isn't used in the cattle raid, but swift-footed Achilles. They're both fast, they're both strong, they're both blonde, although Achilles is kind of like strawberry blonde, maybe more gingery. This just in, Achilles might have been ginger, what the hell? His son was definitely ginger. Anyway, both had best friends who they trained alongside, who they lost, unfortunately, in battle. Literally just told you Cu and Ferdia were both trained by Skaha on the Isle of Skye. Achilles had his best pal, boyfriend, we're not saying best pal. Those two were boyfriends. Patroclus, who he trained alongside with Chiron. Patroclus donned Achilles' armour to rally the troops and raise the morale during the Trojan War when Achilles took a big massive huff. Patroclus ended up dying on the battlefield, and it was kind of Achilles' fault, and that triggers his rage. Which brings me on to point number 5. Point number 6. Point number 5, doesn't really matter. They both had massive rage issues. Cu has his Restrad where he physically transforms in anger, and the entire theme of the Iliad is the wrath of Achilles. The first line in the Iliad is literally, I've got it written down here, sing goddess, the anger of Peleus' son Achilles. The whole point of the Iliad is Achilles being majorly pissed off and taking a huff for the entire time. Even though Achilles doesn't physically transform like Cu does, the rage is there. So those are the main points of comparison I've got for you. There is more. There's loads of tiny little differences, but I don't want to nerd out too much and go into every single one of them. It just goes to show why Cuchulainn has gained the nickname the Irish Achilles, or Ireland's answer to Achilles. They're very, very similar. Doesn't mean that they're the same story. No, I just think it's really cool to see the comparisons, especially considering these stories are from two completely different parts of the world. It just goes to show that us humans aren't really that creative, are we? Or maybe there is communication networks. Blah, 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 blah. It's just a bit of fun, isn't it? It's cool! Now I want to touch a little bit on how the story survives down to us to this day. The stories in the Ulster Cycle are set in the 1st century BC, a time where Ireland, and Scotland as well, very big on what we call the Celtic culture. I need to do a whole video on the Celtic conundrum and what that actually means, because Celtic is so broad. The Celts didn't have a written language that we today recognise as a written language. Anything that we know about them was written by the Romans, so it's incredibly biased. Roman propaganda against like the barbarians, the other sort of thing. So the story of Cuchulainn would have been passed down through oral tradition until it was finally written down in different iterations from like the 8th to the 14th centuries AD. It's best preserved in two 12th century manuscripts, one called the Book of Duncow and the other one's called the Book of Leinster. Leinster, I hardly know her, sorry. So the tale takes place in a pre-Christian Ireland, but isn't actually physically committed to transcript until a very much Christianised Ireland, which has its ups and downs, mostly downs. Therefore, we can assume that parts of the story were changed completely to better suit Christian needs and to be more palatable to a Christian audience. So it would make it easier for pagans to transition into the Christian church, but then they've diluted it and they've twisted it and changed it. But then eventually that part of the culture is phased out completely and given negative connotations and sort of forgotten about that part of the culture so that the Christian church can take all the popularity. I'm not making any sense with that. Hate.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live.
And this can be evidenced in the subtle changes in the script from the 8th to 14th centuries. There's little changes here and there. Pagan gods becoming demigods, half-gods, historical figures sort of becoming these weird mystical figures that fade into myth, kings that have been diluted to fiction because they don't align with the Christian one god system and the king who was actually in charge at the time, thus getting rid of that sort of part of the culture means the pagans don't have anything of their own to latch onto, to feel patriotic about and like have their own kingdom, so they have to just be amalgamated into the Christian one. Does that make sense? The Christian scribe, the lad who actually wrote the Book of Leinster, described the story as delusions of the demons. Haha? Huh? Delusions of demons? You mean someone's entire culture? Demons? Get out of here with that, dude, I hate that. Says a Christian scribe about the Celtic story that he was writing about. Because again, it's the othering, the demonisation, the diluting of the story to make the Christian church more powerful. Annoys me, because think about how much we have lost through time because of this sort of thing going on, and still going on in some places. Let's put a pin in that right now before I get too mental. But yeah, this is clearly not just done in Ireland. It's just another great example of Christian attitudes towards anything non-Christian, especially back in the day, in an attempt to control and gain more land and power and stuff. Let's finish that now before I get too raging. So that's all I really have to tell you about Cuchulainn, Ireland's answer to Achilles. I do think it's really funny how both these lads were promised fame and glory at the cost of a short life, and somehow these stories have trickled down to us to this day despite being so ancient. Maybe it's a gift from the gods. If you'd like a closer look at other aspects of the Tombo Cúailnge or the Ulster Cycle, other bits of the story, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, it's just really cool to see such similarities between two stories from two completely different parts of the world. In case you don't know, the Iliad is set in ancient Greece. The Ulster Cycle is set in Ireland. Did I mention that, by the way? Yeah, I said it's Irish. Imagine I went this whole video without mentioning that the Ulster Cycle is set in Ireland. That would be cringe. There's probably no relation. It's probably just a lack of creativity maybe at some points in the earth there was cultural trade, exchange of stories and stuff, people travelling. There's probably some sort of communication there. Don't ask me to prove it, because I can't really, except for these similarities, but it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? All my bibliography will be linked below, as well as any further reading. I urge you to read the story for yourself, it's absolutely class. And shout out to my boss for helping me with my Irish pronunciations. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't butcher them too much. I'll get the cringe if I did. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell if you want to be notified every time I upload something. And also come over and see me on Twitch, where I live stream once a week as well, most of the time. Not really history or archaeology related all the time, but it's something a bit different. Or if you have any questions, you can ask them live or chuck them in the comments as well. Anyway, tatty bye. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye bye.